Alrighty, I call to order our, what is today? The 25th of October's. Can you hear me? No? Yes? All right, let's try it again. I call to order the October 25th Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee meeting. We had a lot bigger packed house than we normally have. I like it. It's kind of fun. Makes me feel special. We're just going to do a quick run around the room here of folks, at least at this part, and then we'll give some of our other guests a chance to introduce themselves, but we'll start in the end. Cody Hutchins, contract analyst.
Hello, I'm Nan Hackett, manager of state and federal programs.
I'm Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting and Transparency.
Michael Gustin, Assistant Treasurer.
Good morning, Lauren Roberts, Chief Audit Executive.
Jennifer Wagner, Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer.
Ben Lindy, board member.
Brandon Craig, board member.
Dr. Kareem Moffitt, board member.
Good day, Shauna Murphy, interim superintendent.
Adam Bessler, instructional materials manager.
Hector Polanco, CFO of Cincinnati Preschool Promise.
Jeremy Gallahue, Chief Information Officer.
Phyllis Davis, the board's administrative assistant.
All righty. And then Rob, if you want to tell folks online how they would like to participate, or if they would like to participate, how?
Good morning. If you'd like to speak during the hearing of the public section of the meeting, please click the hand icon in the bottom corner of your screen. We will ask your name and association to the district, and then we will invite you in at the end of the meeting to speak for 2 minutes. Thank you.
All righty. So I think the first item on our old business list, and I like to keep an old business one on here just for things that we've either covered or been working on, is our treasurer search update. I don't think there's actually much to update. We have looked at our RFPs entries and the board reviewed them to consider which ones would be the likely one we would go with. And so we're in the process of finalizing that step. That would be, I believe, we'll vote on that on Monday's board meeting. I think that's the plan there. And then the next stage for that is for us to begin the process of putting a job description for the treasurer, position description for the treasurer's posting, and then trying to get as many folks who would like to apply as possible to apply. This is a really important position in the district, and so I look forward to seeing all those wonderful people in the district who have the experience and the qualifications who would like to apply. Treasurer Wagner, is there anything else that I've forgotten about that?
I think the OSBA gentleman is coming to tomorrow's workshop at the end to discuss process, I believe.
Yeah, so we'll have the OSBA, one of the particular folks we put in an RFP, come to speak with us to talk about process and what things that they can provide as well and what we're looking for. So for those who would like to observe, feel free to join us tomorrow. Because the board always meets. Next on our agenda. So we've asked, and because of my own poor communication skills, have not always got it out to them early enough. We've asked several of our folks who are some of our important vendors, important folks that we partnered with, and folks who have really connected with us and offer a lot of services to students that come through our district to kind of come in and talk about some of the benefits and the things they've done financially, using our resources to ensure that we're good stewards of those funds. And so one of the ones we've done historically is our partners with Preschool Promise. And so I want to turn it over to them for presentation. I understand, I think, Ishara online. All righty, and then we have Hector here as well.
She'll be taking the lead on that.
Okay.
I am here. Good morning.
It's like a voice from the sky. So,
So
the floor is yours.
fantastic. I'm not sure if you can see me. My video isn't enabled yet, but I hope that you all have the hard copy of our annual report, and we're pleased to share with you results and outcomes that we accomplished together in 2023, 2024. If you'll move to the first slide, you will see, as usual, we have our high impact numbers. And we're pleased to say tuition assistance was provided at the community provider sites to 1,097 children. this year. We also have a new measure that we're tracking, which you'll see is that 2,112 of preschoolers served. We're trying to be very intentional about the preschoolers who are attending our tuition assistance sites because we know they benefit, even though they don't directly receive financial assistance. We've also invested this year $6.5 million in tuition assistance. We're also proud of the attendance rate of 88%. And you'll see one of the other key metrics is 148 new high-quality seats were created this year. On the next slide, you will also see measures of preschool progress. Assessments done at the beginning and the end of the school year show that there is a 76.4% frequency or higher of preschoolers meeting or exceeding expectations by the spring who have attended a high-quality preschool with tuition assistance. The top 3 domains that children are excelling in is math at 32.4 percentage points increase, literacy with 31.8% increase, and the social emotional learning that we know is so important at 30.8 percentage points increase. On the next slide, you'll see a snapshot and overview of kindergarten readiness, which we know has been true since the onset and beginning of Cincinnati Preschool Promise. Just a reminder that all of our KRA-R results represent preschoolers who are attending both CPS preschools and community preschool sites. And that is because we are so fortunate to have our data collection done and reporting out on that by Innovations. And you can see traditionally, consistently since 2018, that those that receive tuition assistance from CPP are approaching or demonstrating on the KRA at a higher frequency compared to those that don't receive that tuition assistance, that those that live in the highest neighborhoods have shown better KRA overall and language literacy performance compared to others who also live in those neighborhoods but don't receive tuition assistance, and who benefits and it has the greatest impact on our students and preschoolers who are Black and Hispanic. On the next slide, you will see, again, snapshot of overall KRA performance, that tuition assistance, when you control for all other factors, gender, race, socioeconomic status, increases the odds of demonstrating readiness on the KRA-R by 30.5%, increases the odds of being on track for language and literacy by 53.8%. You'll see that data disaggregated a bit on the next 2 slides. When we look at KRA-R performance by social economic status, we see again, SES1 and SES2 are the groups that benefit the most. And you can see the actual percentage points of 11.1 and 10.1 there, the greater frequency of KRA results and outcomes. On the next slide, you will see the KRA performance disaggregated by race. And again, this shows that Black and African American kindergartners and Hispanic kindergartners who participated in CPP tuition assistance as preschoolers benefit the most from that support. Another analysis that Innovations did for us, you'll see on the following slide, when we look at the things that we know we can have an impact on, the triggers and the things that matter, that have a big influence on KRA outcomes and overall preschool performance, we know that mobility is always a factor. And many of our families tend to move a lot that then impacts their ability in academic performance. But the other thing we also know is key is attendance, which is why we're so proud of that high attendance rate for our preschoolers. If you look at the statistics that are highlighted, the difference in approaching and demonstrating and being on track for language literacy for those who have attendance at 90% or higher rates is remarkable. The difference between 60.6 and 40.4, and the difference between 46.1 and 24.5. It will always and continue to be our goal to make sure that we can meet or exceed that 90% attendance mark. I will take a break on that data to see if there are any questions before I turn it over to Hector to talk specifically about the numbers and our year-end financial results that drove these outcomes and impact.
Any questions, thoughts? Yeah, Ben.
Thank you, Brandon. Cheryl, I was going to say thank you and your team for all of your incredible work. I continue to think that this is one of the most important and inspiring things that's happened in education in Cincinnati in the last decade. I'm grateful for all of your efforts and transparency, and can't wait to see what y'all do next.
keep it going.
All right, Hector, I will turn it to you. I have to say, before Hector offers this report on financial, I have to say what an amazing job that he does every year in making sure that not only we stay on track to budget and tax, but that our reporting practices are so exceptional. That is a call out not only that I give, that our board gives, but every year that our external auditor gives as well, which is remarkable because the stat that we also highlight as well is that we know that 72% of our preschool promise budget is really spent directly on mission delivery. So with that, I will turn it to you, Hector, to share your expertise with that committee that really likes to see the numbers.
Thank you, Tara. So if we turn to the first slide, it reviews the fiscal year end results for the last fiscal year, which ended on June 30th, 2024. The way that this has been reported traditionally is the way I'm reporting it today. So it's consistent with past reporting, which is we start with the summary of our programs and we budget by program and we show what our results are by program. And it is one of the few instances where I've had the chair of our finance committee tell me, Hector, I'm so glad you're over budget. I don't like being over budget, but it's on the tuition assistance line. Let me be clear. I'm not over budget on the whole budget. I'm under budget. But on the tuition assistance, he's always very happy if I can spend more there than if I can spend in any other program. So as you will see, reviewed by item, by line, we came under by 800,000. This is very common for us because we normally have a contingency line for situations like what we had, which I'm going to show you in the next slide, I believe. Yeah. In the next slide, you'll see how our number of students, the green line that you see now presented, the number of students was significantly above anything else we saw in years past. And there were a number of factors that impacted that. If you look back now at the original sheet, for each program, I provide the reconciliation of the most important items that caused a significant change. So there you'll see that on average, we were paying for, and this is different, like we're some students that come to us that we don't pay for in a given month because they either remain in the program too little of a time or they move to some other funding source during the month. So we end up, they come in for a little bit, they exit. But generally, the average number of students in a given month was 815 students. And we had budgeted for 666, which created a $1.3 million deficit. I'm not going to go through each of these items, but you see there reconciled how we ended up with just $450 million, roughly $1,000 deficit on the tuition assistance line. But we track this on an ongoing basis so that we can better advise Shara and sometimes warn our board about how programs are doing so that if we need to make mid-year corrections, we can do that. Are there any questions about this fiscal year end result chart or table? All right. If not, then like I discussed already, the next sheet shows you basically from fiscal year 19 all the way through fiscal year 24, how many students we've had by month. And when I say had, I mean paid, because I only look at money, right? Like I said, we might have some students that were in our program, but exited before I had to pay any funds for them. And then the last sheet is the one that I prepare on an annual basis along with Kevin to help budget the cash for the district. This shows what our overspend and underspend was, well, underspend really, which creates a carryover of funds. And we used to have a situation before the new master agreement where in carryover of funds, there were certain steps that we needed to take a look at and consider whether the funds would stay at CPP, return to the district, how we would account for them. We have a new master agreement now, and I've placed a quite long description, just to be consistent with how I used to do it in the past, of what happens to unspent and carryover funds. But it's basically, I still report it because it's very important to the district to know exactly, and really over the life of the levy. This is part of the, this is one of the portions that goes into the overall calculation of how we've done over the 5 years that we spent on the levy. So what would normally happen is, as you see in the upper right, our yearly budget is for this fiscal year we're in is 10.8 million, but we subtract from there 828,000, which was the unspent funds or carryover funds, so that the district does not really send us 10.8 million. It sends us the net, which is in the lower right-hand corner, which is 9.9 million. And we did this from the beginning of CPP, so to meet some concerns or comments that we had from the state auditor, making sure that the funds remained with the district, even when we had carryover unspent funds, that somehow they would return to the district at the end of every year. And this is the process we followed to do that. Any questions?
Questions from folks?
All right, then
I feel like
sorry.
he can feel that there was a question coming.
Oh, okay, good. Let's do
So
it.
I just want to understand this like in lay terms. This, what you've shown here is demonstrating how you're slated to receive X number of dollars, but you're actually only getting X number of dollars, and that money goes back to CP. This is just
That's correct. This is
Okay.
just to show, because I could see why the auditor would be concerned if year after year we had unspent funds and we kept growing this
Okay.
balance on our side, meaning on CPP bank accounts.
Okay.
But we don't do that. What
Okay.
we do is whatever is left over at the end of the year, we return to the district using this process.
I got you. And you're only showing fiscal year in 24, but in essence, this has been years previously?
This
Or
has
no?
been done every year. So for every year, whatever was the unspent fund amount, we would return
Return
to
that
the
back.
district
Okay.
through this process, which basically means district, I need 10.8, but only send me 9.9 because I'm going to keep what I had left over from last year.
I got you.
That's the way to return it.
I got you. Okay, I
Yeah.
just wanted to understand, and I wanted people to understand what we're looking at.
No, and I appreciate that. Sometimes I get too deep into
No,
the
that's
numbers,
okay.
so thank you.
I do the same for our church.
So just to be clear, that CPS is the fiscal agent, so we keep the funds. So instead of them having to write a check to us, then we turn around and write a bigger check back, we just net it out.
So really, if we were to look at the two documents together, you only received in hand the amount that you didn't receive the amount that you don't technically send it back. You just don't receive it. Is that right?
He doesn't send it back and he uses it to apply to the next year budget. So their budget is funded by two things. One is last year's unspent money, and then this year's payment from CPS.
I
Correct.
think I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions? I want to first say thank you to both of you, Hector and to Shara, for bringing this presentation. I think one of the things that we are trying to make sure to show folks, and especially this year, because we have some lovely things that are going to be a part of our discussion later on in this meeting, is that we are being good stewards of the public dollar, right? And that these programs that we have put funds towards are having a big results, right? And are increasing the abilities for our students to show up kindergarten ready, but also for them to grow beyond just kindergarten, right? So we're talking about when you get to third grade, if you're kindergarten ready there, by the time you get to third grade, you're more likely to be successful. When the time you get to sixth grade, you're more likely to be successful. And that's been a great value. I think it's also worth pointing out, and I normally don't do this, but Rob, you can go back one more slide. I think it's worth pointing out that, and we'll see this in ours as well, everybody has really found this value in using preschool and having high quality education as part of preschool, right? This is something that our community really, really finds great value in and are using those resources. And I think it's worthwhile for, as we talk about the levy as we come up, be thinking about that as to whether or not, or how does the district want to consider that going forward, because I think it may be worthwhile to say we have probably exceeded the expectations when we originally did the preschool promise levy and when we did the renewal. And so now it may be a time for us to be thinking about what's the dollar amount that is the appropriate value to how do we provide these services to the students, because, you know, again, the idea before was expanding quality preschool education. We've done that. And now it's about maintaining and growing the opportunities to be able to continue those programs in a sustainable way. And so that it's tremendous to see that that number went even farther than you all expected by such a large amount. Any other questions, thoughts?
The one thing I would say to, given the comment you made about the upcoming discussions later today, is that for me, having come from the private sector all my career and then coming to CPP, it really is amazing to see the district reach out to private providers to help reach students where they might be, wherever they might be. So it's been quite a wonderful ride for me the last 7 years. I'm really happy of see the district, a public entity, reach out to the private sector for the good of the children, not for the good of the private sector, for the good of the children. So I want to say thank you to the taxpayers and to the district for having this vision.
So this is what good partnerships look like, right? Is to be able to provide great quality educational services to our students and prepare them for their upcoming futures.
And I have one more slide at the end, if I may. And so to that point, the reason that I couldn't join you all today is I am with the 6 other Ohio preschool initiatives in Akron today. And we are always highlighted as leading the field and being able to do this. And so we should know that we are one of 51 initiatives across the country, and one of the first in the initial decades when this got started to do this type of partnership, to make this opportunity available for our children and our families. And what you don't see in this stats, but you will see in the annual report, as well as in our evaluation that is available online, is that collectively this partnership is serving 41% of the eligible population in our community. So children who need it most, who are at 300% of federal poverty level in our high-risk neighborhoods, who are 3 and 4 years old, we are serving 41% of that population. And if you know anything about quality preschool enrollment across the state of Ohio, it caps out at about 13 to 14%. So what we're doing really is groundbreaking and changing. And this year, we were really pleased to say we hit that 12,000 mark, right? So there were 12,000 seats provided over the levy lifetime since 2016, 12,000 opportunities for students and preschoolers to experience that high quality education. You will see in the slide that's up there now, as well as the centerfold of the annual report, that is our levy life cycle snapshot.
Charles, Jen, I have a question for you. The 40% that you're referring to, is that a combined?
Yes, that is combined.
Okay, so it's CPS and CPP kids represent that 40%.
That is correct.
Okay, good. It's a good talking point. Just want to be clear.
Yep. And so for that, we intentionally, as you know, when our board did our our strategic plan, our goal was to reach 35% of the population, but we always knew that that would be a combined number because this is a partnership, right? So on some things you'll see community provider only, and it's sometimes tricky to make that distinction. But when we report overall percentage of population served, that is a combined number.
Awesome.
And then we have, if we just have a few more time left, I think it's 2 minutes. We have our year in review video we'd like to show as our last kind of parting thoughts.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone.
This is going to take just a second for a transition.
Okay.
Hi there, my name is Natalia, and my friends call me Tally, and I'm so excited to tell you about the power of Cincinnati Preschool Promise. Get ready because this year, 1,097 amazing kids like me were able to attend high-quality preschool. All thanks to the Cincinnati Preschool Promise tuition assistance. How awesome is that? But wait, there's more. Over 1,500 families worked with CPP to learn about the importance of early childhood education, even if they didn't qualify for tuition assistance, because everyone deserves a chance to go to preschool. You know what's super duper important for preschool? Attendance! We love learning and being with our awesome teachers and friends. And CPP preschoolers attended 88.4% of scheduled days. Let's talk about impact. In 2017, 12,000 preschoolers were able to attend preschool because of CPP. And guess what? 90% of families could only afford preschool because of Cincinnati Preschool Promise. Wow, that's a huge number, and that makes me so happy. Kids who participate in CPP's tuition assistance program are more likely to be ready for kindergarten. That's right. Ohio's Kindergarten Readiness Assessment results show that CPP kids had a 54% chance being on track when controlling for all other factors. Cool, right? We've made great progress in the past 7 years too. And we're on track to reach even more kids with 42% of eligible population already enrolled. CPP's provider network cares for and educates 54% of children in our city. All kids need a strong foundation, and the power of Preschool Promise supports every child and family according to their needs. Remember my baby sister Haven? I told you guys about her last year. Guess what? She's enrolled at a high-quality CPP preschool. She's living the promise. That's why it's so important that we all continue to work together so more kids like my sister can get enrolled in preschool. We all share responsibility for our region's children, and it's so important to get the early years right. You can be a part of this awesome promise too. Children are our future. The power of promise is helping children thrive, and when we invest in their future, we're helping our whole region thrive too. Join us in encouraging others to enroll their child in CPP, volunteer, or become part of the Promise team. Together, we can make a difference. Let's keep the promise.
I mean, that was pretty awesome, Shar. I'm just struggling because I feel like Natalia reads better than I do because these words are very eligible. No, word. But that is awesome. I think that's inspirational things that we should be thinking about and pushing as we go into these next cycles of figuring out this levy, because I think these are the types of stuff that we need to tell the lessons of and the stories of. So thank you, Hector, Shara. And we will move on now to our favorite part of this monthly meeting, our monthly financial reports, led by Treasurer's Office team.
Thank you. And, previous finance chairs used to say, welcome to finance where numbers are fun. So I'm going to turn it over to, I guess Kevin's going to start on the monthly financials.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to see you all. Next slide, please. Actually, a couple slides. So first, what we're going to do is kind of recap last fiscal year. Part of that is, we didn't meet in July. The board or the committee didn't meet in July. And then just in terms of closing and then getting the budget approved. So what we did is in board docs, there's the full slide deck, but we're just going to hit a couple highlights because I don't want to bore you with 2 months of this data, as fun as it is. So just some highlights for general fund. Ending cash was $9 million higher than the prior year beginning balance, which was a positive thing. We did receive a little additional revenue year over year from the prior year. The main reason for that was the property tax reappraisal, which also increased the TIF. One of the things I do want to caution, and I know the treasurer's talked about this too, as these metrics catch up with our state funding is projected to go down. So while it's positive news, it has a backhanded negative side because of the way it works with the state funding formula. And we'll talk about that more in the next couple months, actually. And then as far as expenditures, they were 8.9 million lower than the prior year. And this is, again, both of these is excluding the tax anticipation note that we talked about. And there was obviously in 24, we still had movement of ESSER dollars, which we won't have in 25. Next slide is just the cash fund balance for the general fund. Again, you can see it was slightly higher at the end of 24. The next slide is the summary of revenue. The dash lines would be without the tax anticipation note. The third column is the actuals for 24. You can see the blue comparison, 344 in tax revenue versus 328 the year before. State revenue was actually up in 24 as well, from 167 versus 150. Part of all of that is the phase-ins that were part of the state budget were positives. But again, other things such as enrollment.
They updated the cost factors, right? In 22.
Yes, they did update.
So they updated the cost of the average teacher average salary and all the different positions. So that helped the increase.
And the way there are advocates who would like that to be updated every year. To this point, they've only been updating it every 2 years. So that will kind of make state funding for those factors be a little bit stagnant this year. The last column is the budget by category. So you can see what we anticipated was about 671 million, and we actually got 683. Next slide is an expenditure comparison. You can see the categories here are just salaries and benefits, other financing uses, and then all other expenses. So the third column shows salaries and benefits at 448. The year before was 423. We anticipated or appropriated 478 for salaries and benefits. So there was a little bit of an underspend there, which is usually built in to the budget. Next slide, I'll let Mike talk about.
I think you've kind of covered it. Just, we did have positive cash flow for the year, which is good. You do see the TANs kind of, there's some things in there like, you see some things we don't normally see, like all their financing sources was really high because of the TANs. And then the debt numbers were really high because of the TANs.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then we'll pass it off to me.
Morning, good to see you all again as well. I just have a couple of highlights for what the grants team really focused on in the past year. It was a big year for us of change, learning, and growth, as we had changes in staffing as well as across the district, and also the restructuring at the Ohio Department of Education workforce. There were basically changes all around. Not working.
Yeah.
All right. We, within our team itself, we really decided to focus on the spending levels at the schools, and we made a really concentrated effort to work with principals and their staff to really understand Title I funding, its purpose, and to really get those funds spent and out to the kids so that they weren't left sitting at the end of the year. And we did manage to spend 86% of the allocated funds. This was critical because Title I just had their carryover limits reimposed after the COVID period. So we're back to a 15% carryover that we have to try to meet before funds get swept. And that's the only title fund that has a kind of low limit like that. So that was one of our big goals, was to get that money into the schools.
And that 86 compared to 57 the prior year. So they made significant.
Thank you for that. We also had our first on-site monitoring visit since 2017. Again, that was impacted by COVID years. This was initially terrifying, but ended up being a really positive experience. We learned so much having all of the ODEW staff here. We built relationships with them, having a new team where we're comfortable reaching out. They were so impressed and had wonderful things to say. So I think that was really just a really positive experience as well. And then finally, we spent quite a bit of time working on ESSER funding. working with facilities to make sure that we are spent out. Again, our goal is to never give money back to the federal government. And so last year was kind of the cleanup year, just timing and trying to make sure that every dime circulates back into the system and gets spent. Nothing's left hanging at the end of the year. So we're facing that closeout in December, and again, we've done a great job. Shane has been a great help out of facilities, helping us track those funds and just really stay on top of it, so we don't have any surprises. Next slide. And then some of you have already seen this slide, if you were at audit committee, but this is just kind of a quick summary of how we did in the year for our major title programs, where most of our basic funding comes from. And again, the key numbers on here would be the fact that we really did amp up spending across all of our grants. We've almost spent on every grant 100% of the current allocation, which, I mean, the basic tenet of federal grants is you get the money to the kids in the year that they're there learning, because that's what the money's for, to improve this year's education. And so we were very successful. Our goal for the end of the year is 85%, you know, understanding there's always going to be a little bit of carryover. So even with the carryover included, you know, we had very high numbers, I feel like, for most of those grants. And then the carryover columns, the fiscal year 23 column, that's the information on the funds that are at risk, because funds only carry over for 1 year. So those were the at-risk funds. And of the numbers in that column, the amount in the last column is the amount that I'm estimating that we're getting. Some grants don't have any carryover at all. So if it's 0, it might just be because they don't have a carryover provision. So again, our goal was to protect sweeps at all costs. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. So any questions?
Thanks, Frank. Can we just go back one slide? And would you mind, first of all, thank you so much for the report and for the information. Can you just, I'm trying to learn more about the, how the carryover piece works. Can you just say the piece about unspent fund? I'm trying to answer the question for myself. Are we leaving money on the table or not?
So what happens is when we get a carryover allocation, it comes into the current year. So this year we have 23 carryover that came in. It's kind of a last chance to spend that money. And so you have 1 extra year to spend it. If you don't spend it by, you know, the end of the current fiscal year, then we are, you know, subject to sweep. It basically has a 27-month life cycle. And so our goal for every grant for every year is that the current amount spent is at least enough to account for those funds, because all the money is spent on a first in, first out basis. So as long as we spend enough in 24 equal to or more than the carryover amount, generally we don't get swept, because 24 funds are also on a rolling basis. We've got 2 years to spend them. And it took me like 3 months of starting my job to understand this fully. So, so don't
And
feel bad.
Each grant has a different rule, so they don't all have the same carryover rules.
But basically every year we have to at least spend the amount received of leftover money, and then we're good, except for Title I, because it has that limit, unlike the other funds. And so basically if the amount spent column is greater than the 50 year 23 carryover column, that means we're good. We're not giving any money back. So there are a few cases where you see that is not true. And we do have one last ditch effort that enables us to still save some of those funds that you probably really don't want to hear about right
Can I
now.
go back just like 2 seconds? So she said the funds in which column should be bigger than the funds in which column?
The funds and amount spent should be equal to or larger than the fiscal year 23 carryover column. As long as that's the case, we're good. That means we spent all the money that was at risk and we're into the new money, the fresh money. So that's why I tried to provide all of it. Now,
Neglected and Title IV, the 2 that are underspent,
So now we're gonna have to talk about the 930 report.
right?
and so the last column is 24 carryover. So that's the new money rolling over. So again, that money is good because, you know, it's still part of its 27-month cycle. So fiscal year 24 is the new money rolling over. Fiscal year 23 is the old stale money.
Okay,
So yeah,
thank
the
you.
ones that stand out would be neglected and delinquent. And that's also another area we spent a lot of time on this year that we're really trying to hit the ground running on.
And Title IV is what we use to pay for the yonder pouches, right?
And so that was the kind of loophole that I mentioned. If you spend money from the current year budget between July and September 30th, they basically kind of treat that as old money, even though it's past the approved date. And so basically, when we saw that we might have an issue with Title IV, that we were gonna lose funds, we really amped up our efforts to get things going early in the year. And so, for example, the money that was spent on the Yonder bags is money that probably would have ended up getting swept back to the federal government anyways, if we didn't act as quickly as we did to get those, to fit into the kind of loophole period.
This is very helpful. It's just making me realize I have another follow-up question. Are we okay? Am I okay on time? So if, and Treasurer, thank you for I think you were going where I was going, which is that it's the Title I neglected and Title I delinquent where the underspending is happening or no?
Not delinquent. Delinquent's fine. It was delinquents, we spent 276 and the carryover was 239. So
Okay.
that was greater.
So neglected in 4. you're saying.
Neglected in 4, but we took care of by buying the Yonder pouches.
Okay. And then I'm this is just my ignorance. I know Title I. I'm not sure I know the Title I subgroups that are here. Can you just say a minute or two about what the Title I neglected is the one we're interested in? Or the one where there was underspending?
Yeah. So
What's that cover? Like what does Title I neglected go to?
Nan?
So like Title I-A basic is what meets basic needs of students. That's what everybody kind of thinks of when they say Title I, but there's many other programs under that target specific disadvantaged groups. So Title I neglected funds are targeted funds, and those go directly to our group homes and our other sites. So they go to Talbot House, Kelly, North Bend, College Hill Residential, Nellis Place. So those support our students that are either in foster care at a group home or that are, in an institutionalized situation for education. And then delinquent is the same thing, but it targets specifically the children at the Hamilton County Juvenile Delinquent Center that we also educate.
And I think we had a challenge in neglected because of a really large site closed down last year and there wasn't a replacement for those kids. So, but they're working towards a plan to get it spent properly.
It's helpful. I'm just catching up. I
Mhm.
appreciate the context. Thank you.
Good questions.
So this is a really good question. And when you see the slide for this month, you'll notice some trends there too. So
Mhm.
it's a good setup for that.
Dr. Moffett?
So just really quickly, I know last year's budget committee, we spent a significant amount of time on this. So I fussed at you all so much last year. I want to definitely say thank you because we targeted title and the underspend, and it just amazed me that we were sending back millions of dollars. And I know you all heard me because you all have been targeting it. So now we're less than 15%, which is excellent. Who knew that we were going to be having that issue with Title I? But I also want to make sure that people know we did a Just Ask Jen on title money
Mhm.
and all of the subsections of title, because last year was such a I don't want to say contentious, but it was a curious year because schools wanted title money because they wanted the reading specialists. And so
Right.
we spent a significant amount of time talking about
Right.
title and talking about grants. But to you specifically, yes, kudos to the team, but you've done a great job with regard to making sure that this is handled. I have many friends at ODEW that have said that they really enjoyed their visit. So thank you to you all for all that you do. Much, much more work to do, but I want to stop and say thank you.
I have a great team working with me and a great amount of support. from the treasurer's
And we were
office.
able to add 3 or 4 schools to the title family, right? So we're expanding. Yeah.
Keep us going.
Yep.
All right, so now we'll cover September and I can probably try to hit the highlights and keep
Rob.
us moving along.
There you go.
Slides.
Thank
One
you.
more, Rob.
So this gives a highlight summary, but I'll just kind of go over the slides. So the next one has, the next slide, Rob, has one more. General ledger, all funds, cash and investment balances. So you can see the grand total is 289 million, 289.4 million. 126.7 of that is in Star, Ohio. One reason it's so high is we're still in the cash rich moment of receiving property tax settlements, which we will not receive again until January. We have debt payments coming up the end of November. So we will use a lot of this cash in the meantime. But We are getting a pretty good return in Star, Ohio right now. We actually have in the treasurer's office, we worked on a cash flow management procedure to determine how much money we should keep in US Bank to be liquid. Obviously, Star Ohio is pretty accessible as well. And then we have other things that Red Tree manages for us for long-term investments and debt related. Next slide. This is simply focusing on the US Bank operating account. And even though it's down in the current year, again, that's because we're trying to maximize our investments. So this one isn't really comparable year to year, except to show that we're keeping track of that and kind of how we've trended with that in the past. Next slide shows the cash balances by fund groups. So general fund, again, a little high at this point because of the tax revenue, 159.4 million. Debt service related is about 89 million. The one that kind of jumps out is yellow, the state and federal grants, where we've spent and we're waiting on reimbursement from ODEW. Again, this is totaling out the 289 again. Next slide is the traditional slide.
Kevin, right
Yes.
before you go, I think it's important to note, and I think we've talked about this the last couple of times, part of the idea with the Star Ohio investments is that we were trying to make a considered effort to get the benefit of those dollars that are not being used at this moment, right?
Right.
So
Earning interest, right?
it's actually trying to get us to be better fiscal stewards of those dollars as they're waiting to be used.
And it's nice when we have a hefty balance there. Last month, our interest was $548,000 for what was held in that account. So
And the challenge is during our low, so if you go back to the previous slide. I'm sorry, that one. So you see the highs and the lows, right? November, December, we're cash poor because we don't get our tax payment until January, the tax advances. So we need to make sure that last year we got caught a little bit because I had too much money in long-term investments, and to liquidate that would have cost us more than the tax anticipation of borrowing. So we basically broke even. And so this year we're monitoring the short term versus the long term a little bit tighter. It wasn't as difficult in previous years because we started the year with much more cash than we have. But as we're chewing into that cash balance, the management between those two funds is a lot more challenging.
all right. So again, cash balance was up in FY25, mainly due to the reappraisal. But as I mentioned, stay tuned. We'll probably get hit on the other side of that. The next one is cash balance general fund. You can see it ticked up a little bit higher this year versus the year before. Next slide is the revenue summary. Again, the blue comparison, column 2 to column 3 is last year to this year in terms of tax revenue. State foundation, one thing I do want to point out here, it's about the same. The beginning of the fiscal year, all of the data is based on most of the data is based on prior year numbers. As we've received in October number 2, they start recalculating based on enrollment. They've included the tax assessment values and all those things have been updated. So it's not really a very good comparison number because of those factors, but we're working through that and how that's going to affect us going forward. The next slide, again, just shows month by month. Again, you can see the high points for tax advances. Next slide is accumulating revenue, kind of on track there. Next slide, expenditures. Our expenditures this year versus last year, the 119 versus the 111 is a little higher, primarily due to salary and benefits increases. I think at this point, we did have the 3 pay period months have both passed in both years. It was September, I believe this year, and August last year. So that should have evened out, same number of pay periods. That's usually a factor. The next slide kind of shows that some of that peaks and valleys is 3 pay months versus 2. Um, and then next slide, that's the accumulating one. Sorry, next slide is the unencumbered or uncommitted amounts. So this year at this point, we had 44 million or 6.7 million. That is not encumbered, but is appropriated. So we take out salaries and benefits. That's what the green is. And then we offset the negative contingencies we have in there. The blue is actual expenditures and encumbrances to date. The dark green is amounts that are still budgeted for debt transfers that will be made. But the 44 million, again, it's not things that aren't planned. It's just they're not in the encumbrance form yet. And so comparing to last year, this year it's 44 million. Last year it was at 51 million. So maybe we've done a better job of encumbering, or, but just to kind of give some perspective there. And next slide is Michael.
Statement of cash flows for the month. So as Kevin said, we're kind of past the tax revenue. So you're going to see a lot of negative cash flows for the next couple months till we get to January. That's expected. Things to call out is we did get the state tax rollback money that came in. It's in other revenues, as well as Green Township's TIF payment. And then there's a negative in other expenses, which you're probably wondering why. That is actually a reflection of when we do indirect cost. So at the part of the grant closing processes, we can charge some indirect cost back to the grant. And that shows up on the general fund as a negative amount. So it's basically a negative expense. So that's kind of what I have.
And then a couple slides for preschool tuition assistance. So this is looking at September. A couple nuances here that we kind of wanted to go over. If you look at well, at the top, you see the total is 728. In the bottom graph, last year was 892 and the year before was 930. So the number of students receiving some sort of tuition assistance had gone down. The number of days were similar. And then what we were calculating for tuition assistance is a little bit higher. So in digging into that a little bit, there's a couple factors that Early Childhood had mentioned to us. Early Childhood grant funded seats were increased from 550 to 600. So 50 of those seats are now in the grant versus the tuition assistance. And then there's 120 seats that are part of a state full day pilot. And so the key thing to point out here is these levy dollars are always last in. So we use all of those grant funds. Those all get used up first. So that's really the explanation as to why that number is less.
So, yeah, because when we saw the drop in numbers, we started to get really concerned, but it's not that the numbers are going down, it's that the other sources of revenues are going up. And so next month, we're going to actually show all the preschool students by funding source. So you can get a whole picture of it. So thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. The one thing that in total at this point last year was 1913 versus 1875. So the reports that they presented, the difference is about 40 kids, but not the 200.
We typically peak in total enrollment in around the January, February timeframe. So it builds up until then, and then it flattens out a little bit. So we're encouraged.
Yeah. And then the next slide is kind of just a budget report for preschool expansion. One of the things we always talk about is, so the budgeted revenue is 15 million, the budgeted expenditures are 19 million. So we're outspending the levy. We're using those carryover dollars up at this point. In September, there was the payment to United Way, the 1.8 million. At this point last year, I went back and double checked. That payment wasn't made till early October. So that's why there's not a comparative number in the prior column on the right. And I think that's it for preschool. Oh, sorry. This one shows the number of students benefiting from tuition assistance, and you can see the drop in the current year based on what we just talked about. And they have a footnote again there to explain that.
So before we move into state and federal grants, any questions?
I do have a quick question that I know you can't answer now, nor do I really want you to, but at some point, are we going to be able to look at CPP data and your data together and they reconcile? And so what I mean by that is, they've come and given a report. We're looking at yours separately. They have funding sources that are supplementing their students. We have funding sources. Can we ever see, are they the same funding sources? Like I would think, just lay terms, just regular person, if I'm voting on something, it should match. It shouldn't be where I'm confused on one and not confused on the other. So is there a time?
We can work with Hector to get that done,
Okay.
but their alternate funding sources really come from Job and Family Services.
Okay,
And ours are coming from state and federal grants, and then we have tuition paying parents as well. So we can certainly do that.
well, I think they mentioned that they have some some other sources. Anyway, again, this was kind of rhetorical for the future, but
Yeah.
it would be really nice to understand and not try to figure out what numbers they put, or look at yours and say, okay, wait a minute, did that match their number?
Yeah.
Or what? That's just a future, Dr. K is going to ask that question. So,
Just as an add-on thought to that, I think it might be helpful as we're looking at, and we'll talk about it later with levies, but as we're looking at what we potentially would look for in a levy, I think it would be a good conversation at some point to have all the students that are touched by the levies resources.
Mhm.
Because I think one of the points that CPP has consistently made is that it is not just the dollars that go towards tuition. That's a part of what is benefiting students and benefiting young children. It's also the opportunities to improve those programs that are looking to become becoming better and looking for high quality status. And so there's that aspect of it as well. But I also think, to your point, there are a number of funding sources, and that's why it gets weird sometimes when people ask, like, well, does this pay for this? Does this pay for that? There are so many different ways that our students can get assistance, but it's important to know that we're using those dollars last. And this is a good way to show that, is to show that both organizations are making considered efforts to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Vera Brooks does an amazing job pairing all the funding sources. One half grant will be the morning and the levy will be the afternoon, but yeah, absolutely. And it would be certainly good for levy presentation materials to do the combined.
I have one more quick question. Do we calculate how many CPP students go to CPS schools?
I think that's part of the analysis that Innovations does. I've not seen it yet, but I think there is something there.
Okay, that's going to be a future question too. Maybe that's a question to them. I don't know, but it would be nice to know where those students go with regard to the investment of dollars.
Kevin, did you?
I just lost my thought, but I know what I was gonna say. So one thing, and this kind of goes along with the levy question, is in terms of the state funding formula, the only preschool students we receive funding for is special education preschool.
And there's about 315 of those.
I mean,
Oh.
we do get grant funding and we do get, but obviously the levy, but just in terms of when talking about state funding, just, that's because some people may assume that we get full funding for those kids and we do not.
And they don't count towards our enrollment either with regard to
Not-
upbuilding.
Not fun. Well, they're
Not
part of our
funding.
enrollment numbers, but they're not part of the funding formula because
Okay.
the preschool disabilities kids are. We do get funding for those, but not regular ed preschool.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
And again, I just, not to belabor the points you made, Kevin, also though, is that we're seeing these numbers actually still probably be up where they were, or if not higher. But we have other funding sources now that are providing additional resources to our students. So again, I think while it may look like there are fewer, if you look at the number of tuition numbers, actually what we're saying is that we're providing new ways to educate
Right.
these students and to fund that education for these students.
I'm thinking like a stacked bar chart from one year to the next will show the
Yep.
differences.
Let's keep it moving with the wonderful world of state and federal grants.
Yes.
Right, can we move forward, I think 2 slides. And I've already said a lot, so I'll try to be fast. We're moving into now reporting for the current year for fiscal year 25. This is our spending through September, and our goal was 17%. And you can see that we're quite a bit ahead in the yellow of the prior years and of our goal. And a lot of this, really probably a large majority of this was due to that effort to spend out the funds early. And I'd like to definitely give credit to Interim Superintendent Murphy and her team and the curriculum team, because almost immediately upon stepping into her role, this problem was brought up, and she just immediately jumped on it, pulled together a team, identified, great needs, and got that information in the system, by the end of April. And so Adam Bessler was really critical in just pulling all those orders together, making sure they made it through in time, because they basically had like 2 weeks to get $1 million worth of purchase orders through our process.
So
And-
thank you.
And I mean, it was just a really amazing collaboration and a lot of focus to really target those funds towards something that mattered. And so it can take a lot of credit for those yellow bars.
It's our human nature to kind of save the money because we're afraid we're going to run out. But then they save it so long that the kids don't get the benefit throughout the year. So we're trying to get them to get started or sooner. So the revenues match the students of the year.
And then the next slide, this is just kind of an overall status. You can see the non-public schools have also been spending out their money. Our non-public associate is just really doing the same thing with them, explaining the grants, giving them ideas on spending, and trying to make sure they are also not losing funds and not having a lot of carryover. The next one, this just gives you an idea of our most important entitlement grants for fiscal year 25, as far as our actual allocation, the amount that goes to non-public, because again, they get a student per student allocation as well out of our award. And so just a reminder that, these are our children attending non-public schools. And this is the amount for the beginning of the year, at least, that is being redistributed to those schools. And then the next slide. One thing about this slide, I believe last year I was including all of the numbers. I'm only reporting on the public schools for these grants because I feel like these are the ones that we're having the most impact on the spending with our own administrators. So that's another reason I provided those earlier numbers to remind you, these are all of our funds and where they're going, but this slide reflects just our own schools. And so this is just showing where we're at after the first quarter, as far as the amount we spent, our allocation and our encumbrances. And again, our goal is 17%. And I think we're ahead of ourselves on everything except expanding opportunities for each. A great deal, again, because of all that spending that we did in the summer. And so you can see, like, for the Title IV grant, it appears that we're basically almost completely spent for the year. We're a little bit broke, but that's because we made all those efforts to protect those funds from that huge carryover amount. And then we also are taking steps to get access to our carryover funds as early as October. And so that will release some flow of funds into that grant, for example.
And that's one of the other things that we changed in our behavior, is that we're not waiting until the carryover money shows up to figure out how to spend it. We're estimating the carryovers now and encouraging to develop the budget now. So when the money hits, we can start spending immediately. Because it doesn't come until January, and then it takes until March to get it budgeted and appropriated. And then you run out of time to spend the money.
And I appreciate Nan sharing how we broadly covered those dollars, but I wanted to be a little bit more specific so you don't think it was just really random. First, with Emily, Adam, curriculum team, we did convene a group of teacher practitioners to tell us what they're seeing as best practices and what is needed. And then we scoped out what that work and those efforts should be directed to, focusing really in on Algebra 1 in particular. So we expect to see some benefits from that. I don't know if Adam wants to share other things that we did with that time.
Yeah, we also made some purchases of some additional supplemental workbooks to support the curriculum, and they've been received really well in schools, and then were being requested before. So, and then the Algebra 1, yeah.
That was summer. We appreciate the time.
Yes.
I love hearing that we're spending money on math because it's my favorite subject. So keep it going.
Next slide. So Yay, this is Esser. Done with this bad boy. The blocks are almost equal. We've done a great job again. We wouldn't have been able to do it without the great work at facilities and Shayna's amazing skills of just tracking all these projects and invoices and the whole team out there to end up with, without giving any money back or having to extend the grant. And so if you go to the next slide, you can just see like there's basically nothing left. We've got a few POs that are closing out with a little bit of money, or contracts probably with a little bit of money on the table. And we've already met and planned, how to make sure that that does also get fully spent out by the time we have to report on this grant.
Awesome. I just want to take a moment of personal privilege to say with regard to ESSER, I was at the Council of Great City Schools conference, and there's a number of districts across the country who were not able to fully utilize the ESSER dollars that were provided to them, but also who were not able to manage the actual expenditures. So even though they were able to plan it, they, as a district, could not support some of the things that they wanted to do and had planned to do and hope to do. And I think that speaks to how well we both planned, but also how well we've managed our abilities to support that, because federal government ain't exactly fast on giving you the money back, right, after you spend it. So I think that's a great sign that we've been able to do so much good work for our students with these dollars, but also that we've been able to also manage our own selves, those dollars as well. Any thoughts, questions before we move to the next? Looking good. All righty. I think next is the new financial report. So do we want to move to?
Just to introduce.
Yeah.
So one thing we wanted to do was to go back to reporting on a quarterly basis is spent by object code instead of just the total fund spend. The other thing about the appropriation summary was funny because when I was helping research all the requirements for a new treasurer and their license, there's a requirement in there for the treasurer to report out all the appropriations. And we've kind of dropped that. This is, that's it. Go to it. We dropped that over time as different finance committee members have only wanted to see certain data. And then I realized, oh my goodness, I haven't been doing that. So this is a report we will be adding back. We won't necessarily present on it, but just to make sure that you're aware, it shows all by fund, the estimated revenues and how well we're doing in collecting that, the appropriation level, which is for the public's perspective, my authority to spend that money from the board, and then how we're doing spending against that money and what the unencumbered balance is. So that's actually a requirement in ODE's treasurer duties. And so you can read it at your pleasure. Did you want to add anything, Mike?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. So just give us any feedback you have. They're pretty dense reports. They're pretty information dense, but we're welcome for feedback.
So, and that we're looking for feedback. This is the one that's by object code, but we don't know how detailed you want us to be. Do you want us to show all the different salary parts and benefits, or do you just want to see personnel as a group? All the purchase services or purchase services as a line, right? And so it just take your time, take a look at it. We won't report on it, get into the end of the second quarter, but just let us know. We don't want to kill you with data. So we're looking for some feedback on what's most helpful to you.
Yeah, I think good.
I was just gonna ask, thank you. And the thing that we could do with these reports that would be most helpful to you all would be, it'll help me know what kind of feedback to give.
So you can monitor how well we're spending and where we might have challenges against spending. So there could be some quarter where most of the budget's gone already for a specific purpose, and we need to understand why, or maybe no money's been spent against it, and why. What is it causing that, and what do we do about it? But it's just to be a little bit more transparent with a little bit more data.
And I think what the treasurer and the team's asking is for us to kind of decide how detailed do we want kind of future reportings on it? So do we want to get to that line? But then also, is that information helpful for us to be able to digest and give suggestions? Yep.
I can share my feedback now if that's helpful.
Sure.
I was going to say, for me, I think putting that report in an appendix.
Mhm.
And then putting on a slide, a couple of bullets for anything you all noticed in the report that you think are concerns
Yep.
and what you're planning on doing about them. But then people can see it if they want to see it and ask questions about it. But I don't personally feel the need to go through it line by line.
Good. I was hoping you would say that.
So, yeah, and
It's a
again,
shock, I'm sure.
Dr. Moffett.
So I didn't know if you wanted it now. I'm gonna tell you, my preference is that you not kill trees, but create a link. I don't need to see that every month. I'm happy to, I do read though. So I will look at the link. I'm interested in maybe a summation, and then if I need to kind of look at that, and I do read my material. So for me, that's how we found out title. So I understand the need for that, because that's how I asked questions about title last year. And that's how we got to this, where you all are being super efficient. That's also how we looked at the school funding the funding per school is by having the data. So I would like to have access to it, and maybe once a quarter, a breakdown of some specifics, but I don't need that information regularly, but I am one board member that likes to look at it, because I think an extra set of eyes to help you, especially in areas that you're seeing concern, is helpful, especially at this level where we're supposed to be fiscally accountable for that. So my preference is I can see the individual once per quarter on a link, and you guys can give me a summation, but I don't need the paper. But I do think it is responsible to at least give a high level reporting of it.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think the consensus thought, at least from this committee, is that giving some form of a summary that would help explain some of the areas of paying attention to, areas that are being addressed or need to be addressed, but still also providing the link to kind of the larger document is a good way to get board feedback on where we are, where we're going. In some ways, I think we are seeing this information, just maybe not consolidated into one document. And so in some ways, we go through the general fund, we go through what we're spending in title, we go through these different categories. It's the larger one pager, which I am also a big fan of not killing trees. So it's helpful to have it, and it's helpful to give some feedback. The one thing I would maybe suggest also is for you all to kind of think about, if there are areas where there may be some anomalies or things that did of concern, then we may do more of a breakdown in that area. So for instance, if, other grants is got some kind of thing haywire going, we might look at what are those other things in there to discuss it with us as to what's being done. See if the board has any other suggestions or recommendations or thoughts around that, or how we report out. Because we have seen, the example being given is how we spent title dollars in the past. Was an area that we, everyone knew it was going. It wasn't a mystery, but it was kind of, what do we do to fix it, and how are we fixing it? That was part of the conversation. So excellent, thank you. What is next from the
Let's see, next slide. I think QI is next.
UI?
Yeah, so we do not have a QI update. Just one of the things where different teams were in different spots. So and probably for the best, we don't have a full QI project this thing, but did want to quickly highlight 3 new QI projects we started in our area. 2 of those are two of our team members are doing the Impact U class through Children's. So Michelle Harris is working on extended time payments, and Adam Gepner is actually changing his project. I had a meeting with him this morning, so it'll change a little bit, but just working on some of our effectiveness. And then because I'm a glutton for punishment, started a new QI team talking about employee reimbursements, which is
And it's as a result of an internal audit recommendation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, thank you, internal audit. Yeah, so we started down that path. Mr. Bessler's on the team, so
Yes.
thank him for his thing. But that's where we're at. I anticipate we'll come back to a full kind of team report out next time. Okay. Next up, CRAs. Next slide, Rob. So another for your information thing. We have 2 new CRA agreements this month. pretty standard as we go. 15 years. One's commercial residential rental. The other one's just rental property, residential rental. So you can see the amounts there. Don't really have anything else to say about that one.
Guess it's my turn. All right, so I know we're late into the meeting today, so I'll try to make this part quick. First, just want to skip through 2 slides when Rob gets a chance, but what we did here was went through and grouped together as we usually look at our over $200,000 contract. What I did this time around after working with purchasing and getting a better understanding of how the contracts and the RFPs work, grouping together contracts that have RFPs that exceed 200,000. So you may see contracts on the list that are not necessarily 200,000, but they're part of an RFP that pushed it over. The reason we wanted to do that and look at that way was to compare and analyze the same services. If they have an RFP, they have the same service, or they're doing a like service, so they were able to RFP that service. It really gives us an opportunity also to take that deep dive into, is everything being RFP that needed to be RFP, or does it need to be reevaluated? So that was part of, and you'll see on one of our documents here what that looks like. So what I did today was broke it into 3 different departments or teams, and you can see the individuals are here with us today. We have Mr. Gallahue with ITM, we have Shayna and Tyrone with facilities, and of course the popular Mr. Bessler today with curriculum. So what we wanted to do was break that down, and my thought was to pick a few contracts to kind of high level look at through each department, and then take your recommendations on whether we wanted to keep diving in further, ask some questions, or take the time to review these at a later date and come back and talk about them. So that document, there is a link there that is a live working document that'll show all the tabs of this long printed out lovely document that I have given you all. So if anybody wants the digital version or is online, you can click on that. Rob, you can click on that too to show them if they'd like. But this will be a live working document that as these meetings go on, I'll be adding tabs at the bottom with the different departments that we are looking at just to keep things consistent. And today we're going to start with ITM. I know I have curriculum on there first, but I did a last minute switch. So if you want to click on that second tab, Rob. And this is where I'll hand over to Mr. Gallahue on what contracts he would like to talk about. But the process of what we followed was looked at each contract. We analyzed and had the teams go into a deep dive of their KPI measure to see where they're hitting their KPI measure as of October. So data end of September to give us an October update to say whether we're on track to hit KPI measures, if we're not on track. And then also we had a column here that showed what evidence is being used. So that way we can kind of see what tools are being used to track this data, just to show the hard efforts of all these teams and what they're doing, because collecting this data is not easy. Following these KPIs are not easy. And just wanted to really highlight that. And then the final column, what we had each team do was go through and have the individual team or department give their recommendation on that individual contract. And you'll see that future recommendations column there has a little drop down of different options that we had on there just to keep things consistent. And then you can see what their recommendation was. So I don't know if there's any particular contracts you'd like to highlight, Jeremy, or any questions from the board at this time?
So there's not really any that I would call out specifically, short of, unless it's the wheel that we go line by line through these, I could probably give a real quick summary that I think might be the most useful, because really most of our contracts fall into 4 categories. The primary one that we have is software and application licensing. So the KPIs around that are really built around uptime and availability, making sure that we're entitled, the service is working, and we get all of the associated upgrades and software support that we're supposed to have. The second one and the biggest category is around our leasing. So our leasing, first and foremost, obviously around the procurement and the equipment actually being delivered and the way it's supposed to be. But then we have a lot of ancillary services that build around that, including everything from the warehousing, the delivery and pickup of the devices to move them, the break fix contract, the recovery for lost and stolen devices, decommissioning of devices. Each year we have a number of devices that either have to go back or we have to sell to offset the leasing cost for what we bring in. And it's a really transitional program each year. So the costs associated with that, as well as then the support for our technology through our Family Technology Support Center. And really the KPIs for almost most of those are around project completion, or the standard SLA, service level agreements, what we have very explicitly in our contracts. So those are the things that will define, average wait time, average abandon time, response time for a ticket or a support call, resolution time for support issues. So they're very explicit, and often for most of our contracts include remuneration for failure to meet those SLAs, whether that's a daily SLA and it's reviewed every day through a report, and some are monthly, quarterly, and annual. The next category is our foundational, and for the IT world, these are primarily like a utility, right? So this would be our internet service, our connectivity between buildings, our wireless that's throughout all of our schools and locations, and our voice, meaning landlines and our security lines or safety lines that go to our alarms for security, fire panels, elevators, those kind of services for voice. And of course, those again are really about uptime and making sure that we're getting the speeds or the quality of service that we require in the contract. The fourth category is safety and security. This would be our Gaggle, which is our student monitoring for the Google platform that has alerting for us. So if there's any content in student usage, indicating things like self-harm or harm to others or anything, that we get alerted and notified so that we can act on that at the school level and with the parents. And then our managed cybersecurity service, which is our 24/7 monitoring service for any incidents that are happening throughout the district, any infections, any kind of logging that we see, as well as their entitled incident response team for when something happens for remediation and recovery. Then a fifth category, I guess, would be miscellaneous, but it's the ones that don't fit into those four categories. Would primarily be our two big ones would be cell phones. That's the administration and staff cell phones that we provide across the district to appropriate and approved staff members. And then the printing and copying. So the contract that manages the service and support for all of our copy and print devices throughout the district, as well as the software that sits on top of that for our click accounting and funding. So that's really our five main categories. This year we have 5 that are under consideration for RFP. 2 of which are E-rate contracts, and from an E-rate compliance, they have a timeline you have to RFP. So that's why those 2 are going out, not from any kind of a service level issue. 2 of which are purchased currently under a cooperative or state term contract that are expiring in 2025. So we'll look to see if those are going to be picked back up or if we need to RFP it to find another provider. The last one is Edgenuity, which is one we'll actually have a more significant RFP that we'll be looking at in tandem with our curriculum partners around student outcomes, service levels that we've got, those kind of things to evaluate the product as a whole, where the other 4 are more functional. So I think that covers it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Again, I think one of the things you mentioned, and it's really helpful for us in understanding, is that you collected, you looked at these as RFP groups that would be over 200,000, because we do have things, for instance, where you have 3 or 4 vendors who all provide the service towards it, but the same service is being provided, the same goal of the service is being provided, and that's a helpful way for us to be able to process what's the KPI for that, because they would all have something similar as a KPI in theory. Other thoughts on at least the IT part here?
Can you go back to the PowerPoint and the summary slide? Because I want to point out that Cody is giving you like the summary of each grouping and then what the supplier diversity data is. So this is facilities. So 13 contracts under facilities representing $4.3 million, and 100% of the contracts are using either a local or minority owned, women owned, or small business. So we just wanted to start celebrating some of that success.
Awesome.
Okay, so are you ready to go to facilities then?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. So we can jump on to facilities. So Rob, if you want to go forward 1 slide, we'll use their summary slide here. So kind of the same idea with the way we did ITM. Looked at the contracts, broke them down, wanted to see that vendor information that Jen mentioned. And what I did there was categorized it as if it met one of those 4 one of those 4 tick marks there, whether it was local, minority owned, women owned, or small business. If it hit one of those 4, group them together, because it could be any combination of those as well. The way our system tracks the data. So that a local owned could also be a woman owned or a small business. So just to show that representation there and how hard our departments and our teams are working to make sure that we're using locally owned vendors, we're using those minority vendors, and giving the fair shot out there to get the work. And looking at facilities, I'll let them do most of the talking, but I just wanted to highlight that they're great to work with. Shayna has details on everything, as Nana's mentioned, and tracking these invoices, because the way theirs works a little differently is a lot of theirs are supply driven or as needed driven, and that's why their contracts are handled a little differently. So looking at their KPI measure, and I'll let them go into it. They have their own little scale of how they do it and their own process of how they make sure that the quality of the product is coming in, meets our needs and the timeliness of those products. So I'll hand it over to facilities and let them kind of highlight their efforts.
Cool. Hello, everyone. How y'all doing? I just want to start off by saying you guys talked a little bit about the 100% of the contracts use a vendor that's minority or local. I think what's important is that we establish relationships with our vendors. And that's why we've been successful with that, is letting them know what the process is and allowing them to bid on services that we feel that they may be able to contribute for us. So we've been real successful with that piece. I'll start off by talking a little bit about our janitorial supplies. We have 4 vendors. This is our first year renewal. And what we're looking, so we've had success with all of our vendors. They supply chemicals, toilet paper, paper towels, all that for our schools. But what we're looking at now is we're looking at going green. So we're looking at finding one vendor who could provide green cleaning products throughout all our schools. Right now, we have multiple products at different schools. Like half our schools have this cleaning chemicals. The others have these cleaning chemicals. So we want to kind of streamline that. So we're looking at, been working with Mr. Burkhart and Sean League and trying to finalize and get the RFP out for that piece. But we also want to make sure that we're in line with the minorities. Out of our vendors, one of them's a minority currently, a woman minority, and the other one's a Black minority. So we want to also make sure that we give them the opportunity as well when it comes to our cleaning supplies. When it comes to our landscaping, we have 4 contractors that takes care of our landscaping. And I want to point out that although we have 66 properties, 40% of those 40% of the schools is contracted out when it comes to mowing and mulching. So our building engineers and our maintenance team, they take care of over 60% of our landscaping in the district. So when you look at our landscaping vendors, I want to point out that our in-house staff do a lot of our landscaping to keep the cost down. So as we move forward with that, I want to make sure, I think this is our second year with those vendors, and they all are doing quite well. We look at their response time, whether it's cutting the grass or snow removal and all that stuff. So that's how we measure those. Shan, I'll let you take over.
Hello. I just wanted to add collectively, at the beginning of fiscal year 24, when the KPI was really taking effect, we got the new platform and Business Plus, our group got together to develop a quality of service grading scale. And it's a 5-tier system, 1 being unsatisfactory, 2 satisfactory, 3 good, 4 very good, and 5 excellent. So our requirement, and I know it kind of sounds generically, but back to what Cody was saying, a lot of our stuff is on an as needed basis. So we require that the rating scale is a 3 or higher if we're going to continue to do service. And the way we figure out throughout the year, it's not, we don't go through every couple of months and evaluate each vendor because it's a constant spend on most of these. What we do is in-house in our facilities office, we have all of the invoices possible come directly to the facilities office first, so we can get a signature for approval. We're not going to approve anything that isn't of the 3 or higher service quality. And we have several different managers, foremen, everybody goes through and signs everything before we actually release it to accounts payable for payment. And anything that goes directly to AP first, it's not going to pay because it's not released on the purchase order as a receiver. So that's collected through our AP 1250. And then I print it and give it to everybody to do their approval first. So with that being said, custodial supplies, for example, Sean League, our manager, he approves it. And he gets feedback from our building engineers and the custodial staff who are actually using these products. Are they getting there timely? Are they effectively cleaning what we need? So that's just an overall general idea of how we are evaluating these vendors all throughout the year. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer anything.
I want to add that we just recently put out an MRO for our supplies with our trades group. We had over 52 vendors who responded to that MRO. I want to thank Shan because she spearheaded that initiative. And that's just something that we collaborated with purchasing department on to secure competitive pricing across the board in our trades groups.
Yeah, so
Talk a little bit more about that.
we have about 100 different supply blankets each fiscal year in facilities. And in order to be compliant with our methods of procurement, we would use price lists and so on and so forth. So it took us a full year. It's going to be in front of you for approval on Monday night. It took us a year. Yeah. But so we could be compliant, we did do an MRO supplies award to vendors. It's not based on an actual dollar amount contract. It's saying that we've evaluated all of these vendors based on what they are offering and what they can offer our tradesmen, because there's so many different specificities that we need. So anyhow, it was a very long collaborative process. Purchasing was so helpful, and we're happy to say that we are definitely going to be in compliance under the methods of procurement, at least for the next 5 years, and not have to worry about chasing new price lists or any, all those different amount of quotes. And it's going to be more efficient for the entire team and the district. So thanks, Taylor.
Oh, thank you.
Any questions?
I do have questions, but lucky you, I have to leave soon. But I just want to I just want to ask just a couple of questions. Again, it doesn't have to necessarily be an answer right now, but I'm thinking this. Sometimes in the community, we get this complaint around timely payments from CPS. Oh, CPS doesn't pay. They take a long time, whatever. The process that you described around having to approve contracts or invoices, does that delay some of the payments, or do you think that is efficient, is ensuring efficiency? And my other question is, do we survey the vendors to find out, like, hey, this is something that they found that maybe they don't have to do, but this I'm cutting the grass, but this big log is here. I can charge you for log removal, but maybe you need to, are we getting any feedback from the vendors around our processes?
Yeah, actually, I need to give a shout out to our accounts payable team. They're incredible. They are super, super quick, super helpful. And we've developed a rapport to where, I send them about 100 invoices a day. It's nonstop. There's never any pile up. So we don't want any sort of backlog on not making any payments. Because again, the majority of our vendors are small local vendors that can't wait for these payments, especially when we're considering the landscaping vendors. So to your point, are they billing us about if they're picking up logs? Is that what you said?
Well, that was just an example. Yeah. It's something that they're not contracted for, but that they could do, that they're seeing that we're not seeing in the field.
That's more for Tyrone to answer, because we have managers that go out and kind of tell them what they need to do, assess, and they will give us calls. They'll give us feedback saying, hey, you do have these logs. So yes, they will. And
that was
they'll
a crazy
offer,
example. I know, but
I know.
Just as an example.
Yeah, but honestly, I haven't heard of any complaints as far as delays in payments. And I've been working with the majority of these vendors for several years. So a lot of them know to call, even if they don't call accounts payable first, they'll call me first.
Gotcha.
And I haven't noticed anything unless you guys have heard anything. I think we've had a pretty good rapport doing it that way. It kind of, it actually helps accounts payable a little bit, because a lot of vendors, even though we tell them to, they'll tend to submit their invoices without purchase orders. And then that puts AP in a bind. They don't know how to code it. So then it can go into a pile of no payment, right? So collaboratively together, I think we work really well together, and they know to reach out to me as I do to them. So I think it's been pretty successful.
Well, thank you for that. My other question is, again, you don't have to answer now. You mentioned Going Green, which is our students are, their voice is really loud about that. But you mentioned one vendor, using one, like trying to secure one vendor for that. And I'm wondering, is that what is considered best practice, to just have one vendor that manages all that with that particular area of Going Green? Because I'm thinking of competition. So again, you
Yeah.
don't have to think, that's a kind of a,
I think the goal
that
is
a
just to
helpful?
standardize the products that we're getting instead of
Okay.
having 30-something schools having these products and the other 30 having these products, and then being able to train across the board, because we have a lot of people that transfer to different schools.
yeah.
So if we have one
gotcha.
product, standardized products, then it will be simplified
got
as
it.
far as.
I understand. that.
Yeah, we do. We're in the infant stages of doing the research because honestly, I'm not 100% sure right now if there is one local vendor that can do the volume
That's
for
what I was
all the
wondering.
schools. So, we have 4.
Okay.
And that's been traditional, that we've had 4. And I think a lot of the reason for that was for them to keep up with our needs.
Yeah.
So we, and times have changed, but we do have a lot of research to start with before
Okay.
we get that far.
Well, thank you for just having said all those questions. Thank you for what you all are doing, because you all are meeting that 100% minority women local vendor. And that's super important. That's actually a board goal, guardrail, something or another. And so, I'm sorry, that was like a sober thought, but I do want to say thank you for meeting that. And any way that we can support, we hear a lot from students around green, composting, and being efficient, energy efficient, all of that. So if you need any other support for that, then let us know. But thank you for what you guys do.
Alrighty.
Thank you, Cody.
And I think we have one more area to cover, and so we're going to try and move through that quickly, and then also get to the few more things that are on the agenda today. So
I won't have questions. I'll promise.
Go ahead.
So real quick with curriculum, we've heard a couple good things so far from facilities and ITM. Curriculum, I'll let Adam take over and do some talking here, but I just highlight maybe what overall view of what your KPIs, how you developed them, the process you went through, and then what you're doing, collecting the data and kind of the evidence, just to give board high level.
Yep, absolutely. And I will be brief so we can move on to the next thing on the agenda. So most of our, we spent the last year and a half really looking at our KPIs and making revisions. And most of our KPIs with our vendor partners are based around implementation as well as delivery requirements and those sorts of things as we get workbooks and instructional materials delivered. One thing I did want to call out that I think that we're really proud of is that when we launched the social studies RFP last year, we made it a point to try to embed a 5-year KPI. So have single year KPIs with like an overall goal. And we're going to continue to do that as we go through our curriculum adoptions over the next few years, because we had a lot of success with that. We like to share our KPIs with our vendors. And so, for example, we ran into some shipping issues at the beginning of the year. And when you let a vendor know that they're held to a key performance indicator about when materials are going to arrive, it's amazing how fast they will come to our aid. And so that has been really beneficial as well. And then, I think I cover, so our implementation and delivery requirements pretty much cover everything. So we've done a lot of work around our KPIs in our department, and we're seeing some success, and our data is looking pretty good.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
awesome. Anything else to add there, Cody?
That's it for the for the contracts.
Alrighty. And again, I think we have a series of these. We'll be doing, I think, 3 or 2 more for the rest of the year. But it's really important that we did analysis of our contracts before, but it's also really important to look at how we are evaluating those contracts and expectations. So I appreciate the hard work you all are doing and the great work you all are bringing back to us. So next on our list is the Crossing Guards.
Would be Cody. This is his ROI project for the.
Well, Rob, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right. So just want to call out and first say thank you to Ralph and Nancy. They are both in the room as well today to look over this data and help me prepare this data, just to make sure I'm not leading anybody astray. They're also here if there's any questions that need to be answered. But just in the essence of time, I'll try to make this quick. So if you look at the left side of the column, you'll see FY24 actuals. The idea last year was to have 163 sites. If you keep viewing down, you'll see that we carried an average of 50 vacancies per month. So roughly about 110 sites each month, which each site is they have an AM shift and a PM shift that are hour and a half each, add up to 3 hours. So that's kind of the math behind of where I got the hours from. The pay, you can see the pay, the fringes, and the admin costs. Those were all written into the contract with the city last year. So those are their rates and what those cost us. And then if you flip over to the FY25 side, you'll see that we're looking at 168 sites this year. Mind you, we did have a lot of vacancies last year, so that number may not be high, but I wanted to put the proposal at the highest cost just to show what would be impactful if we did fully staff that. If you look at the student days, 171 for 3 hours a day, you get your hours. And then using the same pay rate that the city did, our fringe rate for that role and that time, the admin cost, and then our SURF surcharge. So I want to make a note here, the SURF surcharge, that is the highest value that it could be because it was calculated on individual basis. However, after looking at the data and reviewing with the team, that surcharge is based on employee salaries. So an actual district surcharge may be lower because we hit our statewide maximum allowable percentage. That data is forthcoming, but just to show what the overall impact would be. So just to say that if we did the FY25 at the highest possible compared to FY24, it's an average, or it's about an increase of 1.3 million to the district based on the SERS and then the number of sites. So
I asked Cody to do this analysis because I'm trying to train people to think about the total cost of ownership of a project. So it's not as simple as absorbing a contract that we have additional costs that go with that. What's not mentioned here is the additional strain on the departments that have to support these people, HR and payroll, right? We're adding a more of a burden on those departments. So the risk of creating more errors and stuff like that grows. But so we just want to look at the total cost before we made a final decision whether to move forward or not.
May I add that for me coming in, meeting with the city, we were told we're not doing that anymore. So if we don't figure out how to absorb it, I don't know that there'll be crossing guards for children.
I think, and again, I'll open up to the floor for folks, but I think it's important, we don't make a decision today and we don't make a decision tomorrow about whether we do this or not. But it is, important to recognize what those costs would be. And also that some of the benefits of the crossing guard sites, and maybe I think we look at it, whether or not we do all the sites that we still have. Maybe we have to look at areas around our schools more so than areas that are common passageways where some of our other students, or some of the other students who live in the district who go to non-public schools utilize. Or areas, again, if there was a large number of vacancies, what do those vacancies look like, and how are we recruiting those folks to do this work? Because I think to your point, Treasurer Wagner, that there is it's a lot of effort that goes into supplementing someone who may not work a full day or may not work consistently. And how do we manage those folks through HR? But other thoughts from our board members? I will go to Dr. Moffitt because I know she has to leave soon.
I do. Thank you. I think that this is something, we have a joint meeting coming up with the city and CPS that we need to have presented by you and your team around what the costs are, so that we can put this out to the public so that they know what we're anticipating, what our costs are, and that the city has told us in the past that they're not going to fund it, but perhaps they'll have some, perhaps they need to just see the data. So we have that meeting coming up. We had thought about November the 6th, but it cannot be that day because we have the state of the schools. However, it will be in November, and this is a presentation that needs to be had then. So be prepared for this data to come.
If I may, just for clarity, not that they're not going to fund, because we're funding the current state. Okay, I just want to.
Right. So the current budget is about $1 million. Safety is obviously student safety is obviously a high priority for us. We just need to know that we need to make room in the budget to absorb the extra additional costs.
Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brennan. I have a special appreciation for this because I walk my daughter to school in the morning. There are drivers that are not paying attention to children when it is dark and it is 7 o'clock and they're clutching their coffee and trying to get over. So I'm trying both to be objective about the whole thing and also honest about, I think, my proximity to this. I also volunteered as a crossing guard a couple times last fall when we were short one at Hyde Park. And so I think I had two thoughts. I'm glad we're doing this. Thank you for the analysis. I think first thought is I think it's really helpful in trying to make choices. If we can, I know this is not always the easiest thing to do in the world, but to try to put the costs in some kind of comparable basis alongside other choices we have, so if it's fine room for it in the budget, it's going to come down to, do we do blank or blank or blank, and so if
Yeah.
we can look, I mean, interrupt you.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
And that's part of the budget building
Yeah.
cycle, yes.
Yeah. And so as part of that budgeting, so the best way I know how to do that is to try to put it in per student terms and say, like, here we have more asks than we have room for. Here are 50 of them, all expressed in per student dollars per student. Let's have a conversation and engage community input or engage the board on what combination of those within our budget constraint does the most good that we can for children. And just one last thought, but I didn't mean to interrupt you.
The caution about cost per student is, because this is an argument that I had at the Edunomics class with Marguerite. She always wants to use the total population, but I think that's misleading because not every child benefits from a crossing guard. So it was better to say how many kids are being benefited from walking from a crossing guard, using that as a cost per student.
Whatever we use, I
Okay.
think just something that's consistent across the, to somehow, gosh, should we do this, or should we invest in an online tutoring program, or
Right,
should
right,
we,
right,
have like an additional security guard, or
Right.
should we do, and then the other thing was, and this gets into the, division of labor with the city. I only have my narrow window into this through my experience at my daughter's school. And so I'm open to the idea that my experience is not representative. If my experience is representative, I was just incredibly disappointed with the reactive posture to hiring that we got from the city. Which was basically, we're going to have a link online. I could be wrong, but as I understood it, there's a link online. We will process applications that come to us, but we're not going to do anything proactive to try to find people to fill these positions. Like, in what organization is it cool to just hang out and see who applies? Like, if something is important, like, go find people. Like, in our age of social media, this is not difficult, and it's not expensive, I think, to invest like a relatively small amount of money to drive application traffic through social media advertising. Again, it may be that all those things were happening and people have tried this and it didn't work, in which case I'd like to amend my message just to say thank you. But like, if it didn't happen, I think if we're going to keep this if we're going to have this in-house, like, let's do it right, and let's go find people, let's get them out on places where they can make a difference. Rant over.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, I think this is helpful, Cody, bring this to us so we have the dollars in mind. And I think this is another opportunity for the board to think about, kind of our directives and our goals as we have a conversation tomorrow about a myriad of things. But I think this is one of the things that, again, to the superintendent's point, this is a safety issue. And so we do need to figure out what's the best way to invest those dollars. I think it would be curious also to see, again, of those 68 anticipated sites, or I'm sorry, 168 sites, which one of those directly connect to our students versus which one of those are, just a general passageway that folks utilize. I know there's a couple of places where, and that also maybe goes into how do you get people to do it, to your point, Ben. You may have spaces where, everybody's willing to volunteer there, but no one's willing to volunteer over here. Or everybody's willing to work this location, no one's willing to work that location. And those type of things are just things for us to be thinking about as we process through that. But thank you for bringing this is information that's much helpful.
My pleasure.
I'm sure we had the pleasure of having the board president for a moment there in the room, so I'm sure she'll be excited to see this information as well later. She's left now.
It's in the stack for tomorrow too, for the rest of the board.
Let's keep ourselves moving.
Okay, so the next thing on the list is budget.
Yes.
And so you have an attachment, or the budget timeline, the high level budget timeline. And And then that'll kind of be refined after tomorrow's conversation with the board, talking about budget priorities and as that conversation keeps moving forward. Right now, the student projections are being developed. And so that kind of drives the rest of the budget to begin with. I had a meeting with Dr. Moffett a couple weeks ago about looking for additional public engagement strategies other than just presenting at boards and town halls and stuff like that. And we came up with putting really short blurbs together called Did You Knows? And so we brainstormed a topic where I'd write a smaller article and it would get blasted out on the website and also on social media just to kind of communicate things about the budget that are drivers. And so there's also a list of the Did You Know topics that we came up with. If you have any ideas or suggestions, we're happy to do that. And we're going to kick that off here shortly. You can go to the levy slide.
Well,
I'm
just
sorry.
quick, before we move from that, I just wanted to say, I think I appreciate this doing this because I think this is also getting us ahead of the game where we need to be as we go into next year's budget and making sure that we get it done on time. That's
Yeah.
my ultimate goal, is
Yes.
to make sure we get a budget done on time.
Yes.
So,
We'll have a party.
on us, not on the budget.
Right. And so as we know, we're getting ready to enter into a new levy cycle. The current levy that's coming up for renewals in November of 25, November 4th, to be exact. And there's 2 requirements of action the board has to take. And they're specifically pointed out as the number of days before the election day. So there's 2 resolutions, one where you publicly state the need to have a levy. The auditor certifies the millage in the language, and then you adopt that language and millage in your intent to proceed to put something on the ballot. And so if you have to have the second resolution into Hamilton County no later than 4 p.m., 90 days prior to the election, which for you would be August 6th, your board meeting prior to that is August 4th. So, but you have to do that resolution sometime before August 4th. The first resolution is due in July, because it's 100 days before election. The last time we did a levy cycle, we did the first resolution in March and the second resolution in April. So we're way ahead of the game. The benefit of doing it early is you might get a really cool issue number instead of it, like being at the top instead of at the bottom of the list of issues. The other thing I wanted to point out is that I think we have 4 board member seats that are up for re-election in that levy cycle.
Yes.
So we'll be talking about different options on what to do with the levy that's coming up since we've kind of outgrown the preschool part of it. We're going to go over that tomorrow. Mike and I met with Jens Sutmuller and he's our campaign manager, and Brenda Weimer, who's our bond counsel. So making sure that we have everything, all the different options available to you.
Awesome. And again, I think this is helpful information as we think about our budget as well, because, the decisions we make with regards to the levy will ultimately be a part of whatever budget discussions we have. The other thing that I think is helpful for us in talking about this, when we're getting really early on, is just, we're going to have to think about our facilities needs and how we fund those as well. So we want to make sure we're doing everything in the right process, getting it done early so we can have more time to dedicate to these other factors that are a part of what's going on in our district.
Can I just introduce an update on a topic? real quick?
Yes.
This is real quick. So, we've been looking at the treasure pipeline and succession planning, and we have 2 members sitting next to me that have treasure licenses already, Mike and Kevin. And then Mike and I developed a treasure pipeline because you have to have 300 hours of internship time under a licensed treasurer. And I wanted to celebrate because Adam Bessler has become part of our treasure pipeline and is doing his work. So we have others in the department that are interested in working in that. Everybody's at different stages. And I also have an assistant principal in another district who's contacted me about being part of this pipeline. So it's exciting work. And I'm so pleased with Adam's partnership.
Well, and again, congrats, Adam. Succession planning is another one of my favorite topics. And so I love the idea of growing the skills and knowledge that folks have to prepare them for the next opportunities. And so Congrats. Last things on our agenda is just highlighting the things we'll be talking about for the next few meetings. Coming up soon is our 5-year forecast. Another favorite of the board here. So we do the one in November that we then present, and then we also will be doing part 2 of our vendor contract performance review. And then I think we are hoping to have another one of our partners, Activities Beyond the Classroom, be able to attend either our November or December meeting to kind of just present again what they've been up to and how we've used the dollars from the district in a fiscally smart and sustainable way. Rob, do we have any folks online? And then I know we have some wonderful guests here today. I see Julie and Michelle, and I see Emily back there, as well as board member Crossins in the back of the room there. Any public safety? Yeah, come on up, Julie.
One of the things that I would like to bring up and talk about is the crossing guards. If the crossing guards, they are on the streets of Cincinnati, and if we put our employees on the streets of Cincinnati, is that in our jurisdiction for them to, if there's a problem, that they can report any types of problems that they're having? I know that the city is very adamant that we can't tell them where we need signage. We can't tell them where we need lights. I'm not sure how we can take that over, and they don't have any responsibility when it's on the streets of Cincinnati.
So that's certainly something we can take back to general counsel to get some guidance on as to what exactly the status of. I do believe what was proposed at the last joint meeting, or it was one before that, was that it would still be certified under the city, but that we would just be responsible for the employee and now the management of the employee. But that is something certainly we can raise to the general counsel.
I mean,
provide
if
some
they-
additional guidance.
how do you, I mean, that's just like when they came and they said they wanted CPS employees at the bus or at the bus stops. We can't monitor people in the public. So I'm not sure how we can do this with the crossing guards. Yes, I know we need crossing guards. They're very important. But they don't even really give us that much say in where the crossing guards are.
Yeah, again, I think this is something we certainly raise the issue of what their jurisdiction is to the general counsel to provide some guidance on. And I think ultimately the board has to decide, kind of the direction we're going with regards to how the city is willing to do and what they're not willing to do. But thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Anyone else? Any others? No. Well, outside of Ben and myself and the treasurer and the superintendent, all of you all are free to go for the rest of the weekend. We'll be back here tomorrow.